Sudbury tonight, and we're having a beer. We're having a beer in whereabouts are we?
We are in the Brewery Tap.
Brewery Tap. And you are James Domestics.
Indeed, I am.
Yes. So it's and you're James Domestics. Where did the name Domestics come from?
Well, I've been in a band for, I suppose, nearly 13 years now, called the Domestics, and over time, I think, you know, we travel around the country, we've been around Europe and that, and everybody, after a while, if you're in a band, particularly if you're the one that does all the organising of things, and you tend to be the face of it in a lot of instances, people end up calling you James Domestic. Oh, not James Domestic, but in my case, James Domestic. I know people, I know a guy, funny enough, he's the publisher of... He's a publisher who runs Earth Island Books, who my books are out with. And he used to be in a band called the Couch Potatoes, and everybody knew him as Dave Potato. and it always ends up being like that if you're the main one that does the stuff, because it's just a really easy verbal shorthand so that people know who you're talking about and what band they're from. Yeah. So I ended up just being James Domestic, and it's just stuck, and in the end I ended up basically changing everything on Facebook and every other social media platform to that, because more people probably know me as James Domestic than know what my actual name is. So
it's brilliant. It's great. So how did you arrive at Domestics in the first place then? Was it just a band name that was picked as out of randomness?
Yeah, kind of, but it was like, because it was like, I'd not done a band for a couple of years, and I had no real plans to do a band to the degree that we have done it. But I'd been messing around doing some dub reggae stuff in the shed that I'd built and tried to soundproof very badly. Obviously I hadn't a clue what I was doing. You could, honestly, I mean, you could hear it, you know, could hear it bloody 3 feet outside. But anyway, I was just making some dub reggae in there and stuff. And I thought, do you know what, I've got a few ideas for some sort of hardcore punk songs. Oh, I'll record those while I'm here as well. So I had my own little recording sort of set up in there. And I did them, and I thought, actually, I've got quite a few of them now over the course of a few months. Maybe I'll try and put a band together. We'll just do a couple of local gigs, you know. So I'd not long lived in Sudbury. I'd only been in Sudbury a couple of years, so I didn't really know anyone much. Particularly as I was working in Colchester as well at the union. So I was just backwards and forwards basically. I didn't really know hardly anyone here other than Lou, my other half. And so I ended up putting an advert in Roy's of Wroxham, which is like this. Have you heard of Roy's?
No.
I'd never heard of it until I moved to Sudbury. It's like, I don't know what you call it, but like a mini supermarket sort of thing. Yeah. A bit like, I don't know, what do you call it, Tesco's local or whatever, Sainsbury's local.
Yeah, Quickie Mart.
It's sort of like a Quickie Mart, like a big Quickie Mart. It does clothes and it does, you know, beer and scratch cards and bits of gardening stuff and all sorts of bits and bobs, you know. And when I first came there, I'd never heard of it, but apparently the sort of head one is in somewhere called Wroxham, and it's called Roy's of Wroxham. But anyway, so I went in there, and I used to have a board where you could put adverts and stuff up. So I put an advert up, you know, looking for band members, and I got a call from a guy called Rhodes, who comes in here. I know he's in here all the time. He probably pop in later, to be honest. And he got in touch, and he really wanted to play bass. But I'd actually already got a bass player lined up. So he said, well, I can play guitar as well, I'll play guitar in that. And in the end, he ended up bringing a mate of his in, Dan, on second guitar. The original bass player didn't work out, he changed drummers, etc., etc. But the long and short of it is, we did a few gigs, you know, sort of locally, and then we started getting offered things sort of up in Manchester and all over the place. And God, honestly, for a few years, I think we played Manchester more than we played anywhere. We were playing up there like 5 or 6 times a year. But now, you know, we've literally played all over, and we've been out. We did a weekend in Greece a few years ago. We're actually out next Wednesday. We're out in northern Spain doing a few dates, and we've been up through Germany, Denmark. Where else have we been? Norway, Sweden. Yeah, we've done quite a few bits and bobs. I mean, it sounds much more glamorous than it is. Because basically you're crashing on people's floors, and it's all very sort of on a shoestring sort of thing. But you get to go and see places and meet people, and you get to play your horrible noisy music at them, and some of them enjoy it and buy some t-shirts and some records, and you come back and you go, did we do that? Was that some sort of weird dream, you know? Particularly on the last proper tour we did. I mean, we did about 12 dates, I think. that's quite a lot when there's you and another band that we took with all of us, just in one van. I mean, about 7 days in, I was kind of thinking, I'm getting a bit twitchy. I'm not sure I want to do the other 5 days, but we got through it and it was all fine. But yeah, no, it's great, and you just got legs unexpectedly, really. In the same way, I guess that the podcast thing, that's for you. All the things that you've done off the back of that those initial conversations, that initial idea, has just gone. It's exponential, isn't it? You do one thing that leads to something else, and then suddenly you find yourself, playing at some giant squat in Greece, and being ferried around by the local taxi mafia to places that tourists can't go, but you can because you're with me. Places that things like that,
Now I want you to sing.
Sing me your supper. That's not a Greek accent, is it? No. Apologies to any Greek friends listening.
Your music, then, it's sort of like a real heavy punk, would I sort of say? It's sort of like a real. Well, I'm not going to say grungy because that's a new term, because it's not that. So, what is it?
It's hardcore punk. So it's kind of like you had the original wave of punk. So late 70s, Ramones, Pistols, Clash, all those sort of second-tier bands, third-tier bands, all of those kind of ones, and. Then really, I suppose, around 1980, you started to get bands over in this country like GBH and Discharge that were really upping the aggression and upping the tempo and things like that. Then you had bands over in the States like Black Flag, Circle Jerks, that kind of stuff, who were then taking that even further. So you then ended up with hardcore punk, which is effectively is just a more distilled, faster, harder-edged kind of sound, and that is a sound that has been in the underground really since then, and there are different styles. I mean, the Japanese style, which I'm very keen on, bands like Ghouls, Warhead, Deathside, those kind of bands, they do something very different to what say the Swedish bands like Anti-Semites or Totalitar, Haratis, bands like that do. They all have their own distinctive things, but the joining sort of factor, the thing that hangs it all together, is that it's all fast and aggressive and generally quite short songs. And I always liked that kind of stuff. And when I was first putting Domestics together, I'd been listening, there was a few things that I'd picked up on and a few bands that had got quite popular in a very underground way. And I was like, do you know what? I love the sound of this. There's not really many songs. There's not much I can remember. And because I've always really liked a lot of kind of, I guess you'd call it pre-punk and also going into new wave, so late 70s into early 80s. Things like Joe Jackson, things, those kind of things, the early Cars, that sort of stuff. And I've always liked things like the Kinks and a lot of 60s stuff as well. I was thinking, well, if I could actually make some memorable tunes, but in this style, that would be how I'd want to do it, And it's not to say there aren't other bands that do that, but, I like riffs and I like shouting. But if that's all it is, and I can't remember it after, I get a bit bored. I want something that I can actually. I mean, we've got songs in the set now that if we play to a familiar crowd, they know the words. They can sing along, which is amazing. Particularly if you're in another country. I might only know the chorus, but but to see them, shouting back, the chorus lines is just amazing. Some little song that I wrote, 5 minutes walk up the road from here. It's just mad. So.
That's brilliant. So you got a following sort of worldwide that. So when you say like the Japanese influence and all that, are these sort of like Japanese underground bands?
Definitely, yeah. It's my favourite sort of Japanese band, I guess, is probably Ghouls. They've just split up actually last year, but they've been going since about 1980. But there are loads of much more, much more current Japanese bands that do Clone and Kriegshog and bands like that. Who are, again, taking it on, modernising it a little bit, but still keeping everything really raw. And I think that's the key to hardcore. It needs to be kept raw. You don't want it to be overproduced. It kind of needs to sound like it was recorded in a bin, but still discernible. There's a lot of things. And ask somebody else about hardcore, they'll tell you something, something different that it needs to be. So it's like anything else, it's all a bit subjective. But But yeah, and there's loads of Swedish bands. We've played with some great Swedish bands. Who do we play with? We played with Straw and Regimen. I mean, these are bands that no one will have heard of. There's probably listening to this podcast, but you know, to people that are into it, you know, they know they're great bands.
No, that's it. So if you were like, if you had one track that was sort of like you'd think that you could sort of like push out there to the uninitiated, what track in your repertoire do you think is the most accessible for someone who hasn't heard your music before?
I was thinking about this earlier actually, because somebody had said to me, because there was some footage from a gig that we did in Nottingham. We did a little festival in Nottingham on Saturday, and someone had commented on the footage saying, "Oh, Shut Down is still one of my favourites," and that's from like our 2014 album. So that's just one of the few songs that we've had in the set basically for 10 years.
Right.
Because it is, you know, it just always works. People go nuts to it usually, unless it's a really reluctant crowd, which does happen on occasion. But yeah, and I think it's a good one. It's a lot simpler than some of the others. There's a bit of a weird time change in it, and that's another thing we will do. You know, occasionally we'll have a little bit of waltz time in it, just for a few bars, and we like to do that, and weird sort of breaks in it, you know, which I think, and someone said to me, that's what I like about Domestics. Another thing we did, there's a band called Pizza Tramp who are far more well known than us, but I know Jim from Pizza Tramp a bit. He's from Caldicott in Wales, and we've played together loads of times over the years. And one day I suggested to him that we made a 5-inch single, right? Not a 7-inch, a 5-inch, which is like that big, right?
Yeah.
And you can only fit 1 minute of music per side on a 5-inch single.
Right.
So I said to him, let's do 3 songs a side each band. You have a side, we'll have a side. And it's really hard. Because I said to him, and by that I mean they've got to be songs. You know, they've got to have chorus to them. They've got to be song-shaped. They're not just a noise for a minute. But we both sat around and did it. He's the main songwriter for that band, and as I am for the Domestics. And so we managed to do that, and we put that out, and it was a bit mad. And then I was away actually with work somewhere. I can't remember, it was in Bristol or somewhere. And I was staying overnight for some bloody conference or something. And I don't know, he'd messaged me about something, and I'd had a few beers, to be honest, because I was bored on my own in Bristol somewhere, some bloody industrial estate somewhere. And so I said to him, why don't we, I've had this great idea, why don't we go from one extreme to the other? And I suggested that we do a 12-inch split, with have a side each, and we did one long song on each side, so we both did a 12-minute song. So, and honestly, it's the hardest bit of work I've ever done. And like the drummer said to me, well, because obviously it took us a little while to get it together to do it, but I wrote it piece by piece and gradually made it all flow and work. And the Domestics, we rehearsed the whole thing from start to end. Sometimes we'd go into rehearsal on a Monday and we would basically do a couple of short tunes to warm up, and then we'd do that once, then we'd have a break, and then we'd do it a second time, because it was exhausting with all the time changes and all the little quirky bits. It was really, you had to really focus on it. And he turned, when I saw Danny, the drummer in Pizza Tramp, he said, "Are you doing what we're doing and just like recording it in bits and sticking it together?" I was like, "What?" No, we could literally go and play that live now. Don't particularly want to because it's a total head mash to do it, but we could. So it's like, oh, right, okay. But there's three sort of 20-second songs, and there's also a 12-minute song as well as our usual stuff. So
that's great. I love the way that you sort of experiment and push boundaries on it anyway, and it gives you the space where you can experiment like that. You're not in sort of like any sort of formulaic sort of thing that you have to follow.
I think that's something that we've tried to fight against a bit. There aren't many bands, even with our kind of normal stuff, our kind of minute and a half long songs that we normally do, there aren't many bands in the UK that really sound like us and have the same kind of hardcore influences as us, and obviously doing those other bits is kind of makes it even wider. But then I had another idea, and I was talking to Rhodes, our bass player, and this was like a few years back now, and I said to him, I've had this idea about doing a D-beat band, but with a saxophone. Now, D-beat, for the uninitiated, are you familiar with the band Discharged?
Do tell me more, James.
Okay, Discharged were effectively one of the bands that I kind of was referring to earlier, sort of late 70s, early 80s, and they basically stripped everything back. The lyrics were like haikus, the songs were like a minute and a half, and they all had this beat, essentially. And it was savage and raw and really took punk in a completely new direction. And all through the 80s and 90s, particularly, and still going on now, it became known as, the style became known as D-beat after Discharge. Although there is some debate about whether the guy from Discharge actually invented the beat. Someone says, a lot of people say that John Mayer from the Buzzcocks invented it, but only ever used it in one song. But anyway, that's a side issue. But anyway, so this whole genre called D-beat, and it got to the point in the 90s when there were so many D-beat bands out there across the world, just little bands putting a 7-inch out and doing this and doing gigs, that it actually got to the point where it became so saturated it was almost ridiculous. Just bands from Mexico and Spain and Germany and just everywhere. But it's a really addictive beat. It's a really addictive style of punk if you like it. But no one had ever really fused it with a saxophone before. And I happened to know a guy, Eddie, who used to play in a band called The Shitty Limits. He also played in The Filaments. He used to play sax in that. What else was he in? Beat the Red Light. But, a horn player, basically. So I knew him. And Rhodes was into doing it. I don't know, Rhodes is a great bass player, so I got him involved. And then I got Bry from Doom, who, if you look up Doom, like the UK crusty D-beat band, since early 80s, I suppose. And I know Bry. And I got Matt from Revenge of the Psychotronic Man. And Charlie, I was talking about Swedish bands earlier. Anti-Cimex. If you do any googling on Anti-Cimex, they're probably the most famous Swedish punk band going. Maybe not the biggest. And actually, Charlie often says to me, we see our T-shirts everywhere, we see stuff on back patches, and we keep re-releasing our old records from when we were going. So they've not been going for years. He said, we barely ever played to more than about 60 people every gig we did. But their legacy has just makes them look like they get offered tens of thousands of pounds to reform, and they just won't do it. Most of some of them in such a state. I don't think they're good, to be honest. But Charlie could, and Charlie's a lovely guy, and I got him on drums. So it's a bit of a weird supergroup kind of thing, really. So and we've done a few records, and the latest one is we started adding synths in. I play a bit of percussion on it as well. And it's not all D-beat. There's one song, the drums don't even come in for about 3 minutes. It's the best thing we've done. Yeah. But it's a weird record, even I would say it's a pretty weird record. So I like to push it a bit. You know.
Is that on YouTube or anything, or is that on Bandcamp or anything?
Spotify and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And I've still got some copies on vinyl. Not many of those, pretty much sold out from me. Yeah. But there's quite a bit of stuff out there. Someone's probably put it on YouTube, because to be honest, what normally happens is after a couple of months, I go and have a look on YouTube, for something, and then it will pop up, and I go, I didn't know anyone to put that up there. It'll be there, you know. So,
how do you feel about that then when people do that?
To be honest, it did really bug me the first few times it happened, but it's been happening for so long now. And I think ultimately, I'd rather, if it's a way that people get to hear it, because the thing is, people said about the internet, and I suppose this is probably quite relevant, I guess, to the sort of shape of your podcast. Really, is like everyone said, "Oh, the internet's so great for music. You can get music out there so easily. You know, just ping it on Bandcamp, do it on YouTube, whatever. And people get to hear it." But they don't, because there are a billion other people doing it, and everything just gets lost in the wash of everything else. So you think, oh, that's great, I've put that up there, and you look back and you go, well, hardly anyone's even seen it. I've had stuff where, put records out, and, I've gone and done a gig somewhere, and someone come up to the merch table and go, didn't know you had a new record out. And I'm like, it's been out 18 months. So I had no idea. I had one. But you're like, it just, I think unless you've got a machine behind you, it's really, really difficult. Even relatively small bands. Perhaps a little bigger than us, but if you've got the right PR behind you and you can get in. I mean, I did a solo album a couple of years ago, and it had the best reviews of anything I've done, really. It had great reviews all over. Even got into one or two areas that it hadn't got before. Ended up on a few sort of end of year top 10s, but only on small websites, really. And it looked at one point like it was really good. I did a load of videos for it, and actually spent some money and actually got a PR guy involved. And he did get it in a few places, but unless you can get, because it was more of like a post-punk, weird pop kind of record, I suppose. But with a bit more commercial potential than most of the other bands that I do, even though it's still a bit odd. I think with a record like that, unless you can get into Six Music, you've had it, basically. That's it. That's the crux. If you can get it played on Six Music, then it will suddenly elevate a notch, if not two, maybe three, But it didn't get that, unfortunately, so it kind of died on its arse a bit.
Saying that, though, I mean, it's sort of, when you watch a lot of mainstream people, like Pet Shop Boys documentary the other night.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah, well, they did, they did a version of a couple of their songs, and they were rejected in 1983, re-released in 1986, biggest thing ever. So
that's
and then the same with Wham as well. It's sort of
you honestly can't tell. I mean,
it's the moment, isn't it? It's the
absolutely,
moment.
And it's about having the right person hear the thing at the right time, who knows the right avenue to push it down. And, when you're trying to get something with a slightly wider appeal, it's actually. It's much harder than just having an underground kind of base,
I don't think there's a rhyme or reason to it. I mean, you look at sort of things like Kate Bush, running up that hill. It was a good enough song as it was. But obviously with Stranger Things, it had a whole new cachet, a whole new audience.
An absolute new life. Yeah. Same as Garbage Man by the Cramps as well.
Yeah.
It's it just gets placed and a whole new generation latch onto it.
Yeah.
But had it not been in that, you could imagine a lot of those kids that if you'd have just went, this is a great record, listen to this, they'd have been old person music. Probably most of them wouldn't have got it, but because it has the cachet of being in that.
Exactly, it has to be that. I mean, I always remember, I was a big fan of Carter, and I was really pleased when they did one of their songs got a backing track of KP Nuts.
Really?
I remember that. Yeah, KP Nuts had remarketed, and they'd gone for these small little tubes, pre-Pringles, and it was like, and it was Shopper's Paradise, I think, or something like that.
Wow.
And it got there, and I think there was a bit of a backlash. I think a lot of the true Carter fans didn't like them selling out to KP Nuts.
Well, yeah, I mean, it happens, it happens a lot, And it's a weird thing, isn't it, the whole selling out thing, and obviously being from the punk scene in particular, no scene is more anti-selling out than the punk scene, but, I get it, because sometimes it's like, if you have designs on perhaps making a living maybe, or, just pushing it further, I totally get why bands might do that. I think it's a case of, if you think about it and you're happy with the product that you're placing it with, and you're not conflicted about it, and you don't think there's anything iffy about it, I think it's only your own conscience you really got to deal with. But the flip side of that is, I really hate it when a song I love is on an advert for something completely inane, and it just ruins the song for you. Because every time you hear it, you know, I mean, it's happened like this. I can't remember what the advert was. It was some insurance or something, Buzzcocks, and we had the Ramones on something as well. Just like really dull things, you know. You think, oh God, every time I hear it, I'm going to think that bloody advert, you know. It kills it.
Complete buzzkill of the song.
It really is.
Yeah, that's it. So with your music, as the music came before the poetry, is that right?
Yeah. I've been doing the poetry probably like a couple of years now. So.
Yeah, and it's the poetry that drew me to to come out and see you, because there's so many different interesting aspects to it. It's sort of like, first of all, I was interested. You know, we'll talk more about your poetry and what poems you've done, which were absolutely brilliant. But what's the mechanics of a poem? I mean, how different is that to maybe writing a song?
Interesting one. Well, I mean, I'm going to say that actually, in some respects, not all respects, in some respects, it's not that different. But of course, you don't have the restrictions of a regular rhythm. The thing is with poetry is, because I would say probably 70 to 80% of the poems that I write generally have some sort of rhyme scheme to them. They don't all, some of them are more sort of free verse, but I generally am a fan of rhyming poetry, because sometimes things come to you that they just don't. But I think even when they don't have a rhyme scheme as such, there's still some sort of rhythm that needs to come through. And I think just because I've been doing music so long, there's inherently going to be some sort of rhythm, even if it's a slightly off-kilter one in them all. But I think there's a freedom in doing poetry, because you're not sort of restricted to, okay, well, this is how I've structured the song, and so I've got 4 lines there, and then 2 lines for the chorus, and then there's a middle 8. You know, you can make it as short or as long as you like. You know, it's you're not dictated to by the sonics of the music. So, and I like the freedom of that, but also you need to be really careful with that freedom, because otherwise you end up writing 10-page long poems that actually should be 2 pages long, because you need to rein it in, and you need to have a bit of discipline. And I think coming from, primarily from a genre in terms of the music I make, and it is about keeping things concise. So I kind of have that self-editing thing. Although actually in the new book that's coming out, I think October, November, there is a 20-page one. But it's more of a story, to be honest, more a short story about, it's called A Note for Sisyphus, and it's about this bloke who goes on holiday, and he's sitting by the pool, and he looks over into the distance, and he sees this bloke pushing a rock up the hill, and it turns out it's Sisyphus, the famous Greek. And he decides after a few cocktails to go over and say hello and introduce himself, and how he tries to sort of become friends with Sisyphus. He's doing it, and like essentially talk him out of what he's doing, because surely, you know, you don't need to be doing this anymore. You know? So, there's other things you could be doing. It's like, no, the gods will smite me. You know, it's, that's a 20-pager, but that's a rarity, really. Normally a couple of pages tops, you know.
Was there a click moment that you remembered where you sort of like, was it you were writing a song and you thought, actually, this would be better as a poem? Do you remember your first poem, or?
I do actually, because I've always written a lot. I've always just jotted stuff down in scraps of paper and little notebooks and things. And I saw somebody I was friends with on Facebook. I can't even remember what her name is now, because it was so long ago. About 10 years ago, there was a bookshop in London called the Freedom Bookshop, and it used to do a lot of activist and anarchist sort of publications and things like that. And the far right firebombed it, burnt the place out completely. Oh. And then this woman who was a poet and a screenwriter, I think, I wish I could remember what her name was, I'm shocking with names. And she put this call out, does anybody want to submit a poetry for this poetry collection, and we're going to sell it and raise money to get the bookshop back on its feet. And I thought, I will put one in. I've got a few scraps of things, and I put a few things together and sort of ironed it out and tweaked it a bit. And so I submitted that, and to my surprise, it got accepted and went in there. And to be honest, at that point, I was becoming so busy with the band that I didn't really do anymore. So then there was this massive gap of about a decade, and we'd had a bit of a hiatus. I think it was probably COVID that probably really pushed it a bit. So I was like, well, I've written the next Domestics record, and I've written the new Pisser record, and I've written this, there's not many bands I've got anything much to write for, but I'm still coming up with all these words and these ideas. And I just started putting them all together in a Word document, and it got to the point I was going, this is essentially a poetry book, isn't it? This is what this is. Yeah. It took me a little while to realise what I'd actually done. Yeah. So then I knew another guy, a guy from a band called Haste in Hastings, a guy called Dave Cullen. And he was having a few bits of poetry published, like just doing small press stuff, And I said to him, like, do you fancy, like, perhaps doing a book together? You write half, I write half, or maybe do 100 copies, 150 copies. We'll just pay for it ourselves and just sell it ourselves. And he went, yeah, that'd be wicked, because we'd played together in various gigs and stuff over a few years. So we did that, and people seemed to like it. So then I just kept going, really. Yeah. And then I kind of discovered I can't think how I discovered Earth Island Books, but I got in touch with Earth Island Books when I had Domesticated Volume 1 was almost done. Mm-hmm. And I got talking to the guy, David, who runs it, and just said, I've got this book. I don't know if you're interested in publishing it at all. It's not a poetry book, and I know you don't really do poetry books. But he read it and he went, "This is great. I really, really want to put." Yeah, he said, to be honest, I know nothing about poetry books." He said, "But this to me is great stuff." Mm-hmm. He said, "And I will happily put it out for you." Mm-hmm. So I did that. I've been doing the gigs as well, the spoken word gigs. That's gone quite well.
Yeah.
And Steve, I don't know if you saw it today. Steve Ignorant from Crass was holding up a picture and saying how much he liked Volume 2. So which was. Yeah, that was pretty good day.
That's a star endorsement for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I know you've been doing a lot of touring. I mean, you've been I think next month at time recording, you're going up to Nottingham, aren't you? For doing recording or doing a reading up there.
Yes, I am actually. Yeah, I'm doing what is it called? Rebel Scum Poetry or something in Nottingham. Yeah. That'll be my third time I've been to Nottingham.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's at the Robin Hood in Nottingham. I didn't think there'd be many of them up there.
No, it seems unlikely, doesn't it? Yeah. There's one round the corner called Maid Marian, probably.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's like looking for a red lion, really. But that's brilliant. So, what is? I've noticed you've been doing some things online, and the word coda comes up very often. What's coda? Is that a collective or?
No. Coda is it's a bar in Colchester.
Right.
It's a weird gig. I mean, basically, it's Vic and Chap, two people that I know, and they put on punk gigs there 2 or 3 times a year. And they asked me to open one up last year. And I've done 2, and I'm about to do another one this summer, I think. To be honest, it's weird because some of the gigs I do are poetry gigs, and the people are there to hear poetry, so they're generally quiet and attentive. They clap, they laugh when they're supposed to, generally, as long as they get it, and then and that's all fine. And it's quite a challenge being a poet at a punk gig because people aren't there for the poet. Do you know what I mean? It's always a bit of a challenge. I quite like that challenge though, because if you can win them over, that's kind of it's an easier crowd to win, a harder crowd to win over, but you kind of feel like there's a sense of achievement with it. Because mostly they're there to hear sort of loud, fast rock music, punk, whatever, and they're not really there for some guy to come talk to them for 20 minutes. So it can be quite a tough gig. You'll find that half the crowd are basically chatting away while you're on, because they're not really that interested. And then some of those will sort of come around. They'll see that a few people are really getting this. Perhaps it's better than I thought it was. And they'll start to turn around. But you won't get them all, But I mean, I did one Friday night in Ipswich supporting this. They were like an 80s goth punk band. 13th Chime, and there was another band on as well. And Yeah, that went all right actually. To be honest, that was a really receptive crowd, considering it was like 2 bands I was supporting and I was on early. They loved it.
So with the poetry, then it's your inspirations. If I ask you your inspirations, you're going to say they come from everywhere as such. But is this, without being crass to anybody listening to this, is this a COVID benefit? Because a lot of these poems are about working from home and bluffing it and being, not and having the time maybe to think and develop ideas.
I guess. I mean, COVID is definitely an inspiration. Well, not an inspiration as such, but certainly a catalyst.
Yes.
And I think working at home, because I still do work at home a couple of days a week, and I work in the office and have a couple of days, and I mean, I'd hate for people to think that some of the things that I talk about at work are necessarily things that I'm doing, because it's art, kids. It's not a description of my life particularly.
I'd say because there's a great poem about a Xerox, which
that's definitely not me. Definitely not me. That one is that's been in the set for a while now. That almost seems to go down well. That one.
Yeah, that really got me hooked, and I was wondering, I know that all these people were only nebulous, and any coincidence of anyone living or dead is purely coincidental.
Yeah, names changed to protect the innocent.
But, but where does the idea of sacking somebody because they're making love to a photocopier? Where does that begin and end?
Well, now you ask. It's I haven't really thought about it before. Do you know what? I genuinely think I was at work one day and someone just used the phrase, "I've been fiddling with the photocopier," because they've been trying to get it to work. And that just set off a whole chain of events. I liked the alliteration of fiddling, photocopier, and then I thought, fiddling, and then it made me think of that Uncle Ernie character in The Who, in Quadrophenia, and then it just all went from there, really, It was quite a quick one to do once the initial idea had come up.
This one's called Phil Don't Work Here Anymore. Phil fancied photocopiers. Each and every click and whir from their solid plastic bodies was a sex kitten's purr. Phil fiddled with photocopiers. He stuck his hands right in their drawers. He'd fiddle with their buttons and caress A3 and 4. Phil fondled photocopiers. It was his overriding kink. He'd slobber on their output trays and fill them with man ink. Yeah, I know, horrible, isn't it? Yeah, I know. Bloody Phil and his proclivities. Phil fucked photocopiers, called them his inky halls, discovered him flagranti with a Xerox. Phil don't work here anymore.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, sometimes they're a bit weird. Sometimes.
With a poem, do you think of the ending first? Do you think of this is what I want to try and say, and then you fit the poem around it?
I would say probably not, to be honest. No, it's occasionally that works. I don't think I have a particular sort of modus operandi for how I do them. Sometimes I write the first verse, and then it will become apparent where it's going to go, and what steps, and I think, okay, I've got that one, and then I'll end on that, and that verse is going to basically end up in this situation. I won't necessarily know what the word's going to be at that point. And other times, you just write, and you get to a point, and you go, that's very clearly the end. I should stop there. I don't need another page. That's it. That's exactly what it is. I mean, I've got some in the books that are like 8 lines long, but that's all they need. Nobody wants to read 10 pages of something that should be half a page.
No, well, I think when we were all forced to write poetry at school, we just went on until the teacher said, "Yes, thank you. You can sit down now." I remember some right dog's breakfast that I had to write to get through it. But and I think that's probably where poetry it conjures up in the mind, to a layperson like myself. It's either like the boring part of
like
English,
torture,
or it's the bit you always get the same ones coming up on telly doing the same trite poetry, and you think, God, if that's poetry, I think
I'm not interested.
Yeah, that's it. But it's actually it comes across quite powerfully in other things, and I'll come on to that in a minute because I've actually wrote a poem.
Oh,
and I shall try and convince you that it's a good poem.
Oh, fantastic!
So there's that. But so with your inspirations, in are there any personal self-reflective things that you're putting in there? Because I noticed, like with Arsehole Man, I can certainly it's as if you've wrote about me in some parts there. I don't know if you've been sort of following me for the last few years.
It's to be honest, I think a lot of people can see a bit of their younger self in that, and there's definitely a lot of me in that. The kind of I don't know really where I got the idea of making it around the superhero, but there are definitely things that kind of, I don't know, just being, it's like, it's very easy, I think, when you get older, as we sadly are now, to look at people in their late teens and in their 20s and go, oh, why are you saying those things? This is, you're crude and stupid and you don't know anything about anything. And then, if you're honest with yourself, you think, well, when I was 20, I used to talk a right load of crap a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
And, and I think it's partly that poem's about reflecting on that and behaviours that you're not particularly proud of, but, also just accepting it and going, that's because I was young and I was stupid, and I'm not young and stupid now. So it's that. So it's kind of, it's partly sort of reflecting on what I've done, but also there are probably elements of other people in there as well.
Yeah.
I'm no fun when I'm sober, but I'm an arsehole when I'm drunk. And I awake, mashed body, mashed brain, mashed soul. Knowing that I did all those shitty things just like I always do. Arsehole Man arrives as a tornado after 6 pints, cape askew, a stain on the crotch of his tights, piss on his boots and flecks of white powder on his mask, quake at his bullying wisdom, wince at his cruel remarks, his ill-considered jokes, never at his own expense. Arsehole Man on the shots, no one can leave now, holding court, being fucking super, knowing everything, putting the world to rights in ways he doesn't even understand. It's just drool, it's words that stagger as much as the frame. He set fire to his cape, played pool and ripped the bays, displays his special powers in abracadabra on the way home. Flying he is, into the road, just misses a fight with a taxi. Arsehole Man, won't you save us from you? Think of the children, he's no marvel. Arsehole Man, is it a bird? Is it a plane? What is this colourful sight? It's Arsehole Man here to ruin your night.
And I think, like you say you can relate to bits of it. I'm sure a lot of people can, which is probably why a lot of people like that one, or don't like that one, maybe.
Maybe some people aren't quite ready for it.
Close to home for that info.
That's it. I think it was a lot of it is celebrating slaying the ego.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it is, to be honest.
That's it. And a lot of the stuff that you've been doing as well is sort of like like working from home. And I liked your Guff CV as well, because we came from the same neck of the woods, and I can imagine the I think that bullshit battles brains is something that sort of sticks with me as well. So,
did you ever go on one of them courses?
I don't think I was ever made aware of them. I think I'll give you a go on my poem.
Go for it.
Okay, so I'll just leave the phone. Right. This one is called It's Thursday. Okay, right.
It's not though, is it?
No, well, that's what they call poetic licence.
You can't get it already.
I've done the course. Okay, right. I used to love Thursdays like you would not believe. Thursday was a thirst day, a kind of Friday Eve. Start to wind down and prepare for weekend frolic, and if I did not drink past Sunday, proof I was no alcoholic.
Excellent, I like that. That's wicked.
Thank you.
Excellent. And again, that reminds me very much of living back in Clacton back in the days, to be honest, and ending up in what was the pub?
Rathborough, isn't it?
Well, sometimes, but Sundays used to be the Crab and Pumpkin.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it used to be £1 a pint. And he turned out years later that the reason it didn't matter whether he had 1 pint in there or 10, he'd still feel as rough the next day. He used to put a load of salt in the barrels by all accounts.
Oh, right.
So it's dreadful, but exactly that. You drink right up to the end of the weekend, and hope that you were just about sober enough to go on Monday morning.
But if you didn't, personally, if I don't need a drink on Monday, then obviously I ain't got a problem.
Absolutely. the fact that I'm, the next 4 days I'm like crawling the walls, But that's what you do, isn't it? That's what you do.
So, like, when you've wrote as many poems as you have, you're on your 3rd book, you've got a 4th one coming out. Are you sort of like, do you ever have like a self-doubt, or do you ever find that you're getting a bit of anxiety about where the next poem's going to come from?
No, I've never really had a problem in that regard. I think it's, to be honest, a few years ago, sometimes I've always got stuff just sort of floating about. What it is, it's about catching it and not losing it. So ideas float around, you just have to like basically pick them up. And I've heard other people say this about other forms of art and stuff as well, but for me it is very true. If I have an idea, I need to jot it down, because I've got a memory like a bloody goldfish. And if I don't make at least a note of something about it, it will go and it will be lost. So when I'm at work, whether it be in the office or at home, I've always got some paper nearby. I might just write a line down, then maybe I'll go out of coffee and something else occurs to me and I'll write that down. If I'm out and about, if I'm in the pub, someone says something and it sparks off an idea, I'll get my phone out, email myself quickly, email myself the line. It's, to be honest, if anything, it's knowing when you've got enough to go, well, that's enough for a book, And that's not to say that everything that will catch out the ether and then work up that I'm happy with, because I do junk probably 20% of it. I would say junk it, I'll put it to one side, because sometimes, it'll be months later and you think, I had that idea and I just couldn't really make it work, but let's all dig it out again and have another look, and then perhaps you can.
Well, this is it. I mean, it's like most things, isn't it? A failed idea, you go back after a cup of tea and you look back and you go, actually, just twiddle that there and that's perfect.
It's about just having fresh eyes, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, I'm Layla Johnston and you're listening to the Bite High No Limit podcast.
It's sort of scary. It's I did a podcast called AI Special with Dr. Emily Anderson. And Dr. Emily Anderson was Layla Johnston, who just voiced up the AI response of what I typed into the internet, you see, and it was like I typed in what I wanted a female expert on AI in a podcast, and it came a whole script. So I read the first part, and she read the responses, and I edited it as if we were busy and all that and stuff. And everyone who came back, who were kind enough to come back and say, it was very, very. You were a bit dry, Cole. You weren't your normal flowing self and all that. And I said, I know. And he goes, because I am an a lot, but apparently I was umming and erring for Britain. And I said it's because I had to create interjection. I couldn't add words. I made the rule. I said, no, I'm going to use their words. But to make them sound human, oh my word, you had to crowbar in some ums, ahs and all that, as if you were picking this stupid long word out your mind to. So anyway,
just to make it feel like it wasn't AI essentially.
It's all things.
But I mean, people don't realise in conversation how much we and and it's something that when I was basically I did a lot of PhD research years ago, and before I got the job that I'm doing now, and I used to interview a lot of people. It's part of the research that I was doing, and you don't realise until you start transcribing interviews how much people and and I think people would be horrified if they saw some of the transcripts. God, I must sound really stupid because I heard that, but it's just a natural part of. I don't know what it is. It's just punctuation, really. It's linguistic punctuation. It helps language flow, and it's not necessarily. When you see it written down, it looks like you can't think of the word, but it's not necessarily that. It's just part of the flow of language.
Yeah, it's a process. It's a flux. It's pulling another word out of your mind.
Yeah.
when I'm at work professionally, I can explain to someone how a fire alarm system works without umming and ahhing, any hesitation. I can present it, I can do it in any accent or anything I want to do, because it's
just there.
Yeah, it's there in your mind. But when you're actually speaking organically, you know, you're always going to have these, you know, hesitations, and oh god, I'll repeat myself like mad. No question.
That's age, mate.
But that's all. Audacity's great, because you can look at the shape of what you've said and you just cut that bit out. I go, I say it once now. I'm
the same. I record sometimes. I have to do videos for my day job, like educational, like tutorial videos. I'm generally only quite short ones, like 5-6 minutes long. But when I'm recording them, often I'll end up like saying the same line 3 times, because it's just quicker to go back and then cut the 2 shit ones out.
No, exactly. No, exactly right. It's, I'm just having a look through some of these books that you've. Well, I've got 3 books in front of me. Cura, which was your first book, wasn't it? That was done in 2022.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
And this is with Dave Cullen.
Yeah.
And so that's a really nice book. It's got a lot of poems in it, and so this is a co-collaboration, isn't it?
It is, yeah. The first half is all Dave's work, and the second half's mine. I painted the front cover is actually a scan of a painting of mine as well. So I paint as well.
Oh, well, my wife would love it. She's a big fan of googly eyes.
Is she? Oh, right, it's me too. Yeah,
that's it. So that's brilliant. So that's really good. Oh, no, you've got pictures on the back as well. So it's absolutely brilliant. And then there's 2 volumes, and this is the progression of James Domestic's career, because we've got volume 1, which is a reasonable novella size, and that's got great poems in it. I Am a Worm, and what's that word say there? Is that human?
Ikizakuri.
Ikizakuri.
It's basically Ikizakuri. That was actually I did actually do that as a spoken word piece on a Domestics record a few years ago. That's where that first came from. Ikizakuri is basically it's a Japanese culinary thing, and it's grim, to be honest. But what it is, and it's not a common thing in Japan, but it is a thing. Basically, when a fish is prepared while it's still alive, effectively, and put on your plate, and it's sliced and diced, but it's still alive and moving about.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's grim.
How about that? Does it add to the taste? Is that
no idea. I think it's probably as much to show the skill that you can mutilate this thing and still keep it alive, and then you can eat it. It's just extremity for extremity's sake, I think. You know, I've got a lot of time for Japanese culture generally. I'd love to go to Japan. I love the art. I love the aesthetics of it. I like a lot of the music. But honestly, that's just grim. That's a blot on my Japanese fandom landscape. That is.
Yeah, and then on to volume 2, which is double the width.
It is, yes.
Double the width.
And the illustrations are in colour.
In colour. And so domesticated volume 2, more words and pictures and stuff. And that was like, colour illustrations. And as I was pointing out when we were, you've got like, let's have another lockdown in this one as well, which looks like a really good poem. And then Courier Bastards. One called Brian Adams.
Yeah. That's the truth. Well, it's not entirely true, but the thing at the end where the woman comes up and asks, she's at a soul night. Basically, what that came up. I do some DJing. I do soul DJing. So I do it in here actually a lot of the time.
Well, it says in your bio you're a DJ as well. Yeah.
I do always do a reggae thing every bank holiday here. I do it. Me and my other half do a soul thing every Halloween. Sometimes we do 2 soul ones. And in fact, the lady that I was talking to around there, I did her beer festival. She's got a pub over at Edwardstone. We did that as well. So just get asked to do bits and bobs here and there. Yeah. That came out of the very first time I did a soul DJ set was in Colchester with a mate of mine. And there was 3 of us actually. And it was advertised as a soul night. And there were posters all around the place. We'd never done one before. It was our first go. And a woman came up and she said to me while I was doing my set, she said, "Have you got any Brian Adams?" I went, "Not really, it's a soul night, so obviously it's like Motown, there's a bit of funk and some Northern soul and that." And she's like, oh, all right. And she looked a bit disgruntled and confused and wandered off. 20 minutes later, Comes up again. Have you got any Bryan Adams? It's like, what? Literally, I spent this 20 minutes ago. So yeah, I mean that is actually the true part of that poem. It's a bit embellished other than that, but yeah, it's just it always stuck with me. What a bizarre thing. Bizarre to ask for it the first time, but ask for it the second time at a soul night, and there's stuff everywhere that says this is a soul night. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, so so this poem you kindly wrote one about teletext for me.
I have.
Because you're now a converted fan to the High No Limit podcast.
I'm no expert, but I've tried to find out enough to get a few verses down.
Oh, absolutely.
So I've called it C Facts because obviously that's where C Facts got its name from, wasn't it? Really, it was a play on that. So yeah, hopefully you're not going to go at the end and go, well, that's wrong.
Don't worry. There's always at least 17 things wrong in my book.
Right, well, this might be 15 of them. Okay, so yeah, C Facts. September 1974, Carl Douglas topped the charts, whilst the BBC blessed the maiden voyage of a young techno upstart. Whilst Carl was kung fu fighting at the summit for a time, a revolution started in room 7059. Heavy set and blocky fonts and vibrant violent hues imparting TV listings to weather, sport and news. With super chunky graphics and clunky animations, everybody knows the joy was in its limitations. Almost 40 years it lasted, a font of textual information, and 12 years since its closure it still has cult appreciation. Through the latter half of the Cold War, through Wilson, Callaghan and Thatcher, Major Blair, Cameron and Brown, the Eurostar, Diana. But its days were sadly numbered with the rise of the World Wide Web, which gave C-Fax a wedgie, Chinese burn and bloody neb. This town's too small for both of us. C-Fax, you must be shelved. C-Fax knew the web had won and skulked off in 2012. Is it merely the pull of nostalgia, the ache of an old man's heart, hankering for the relics of youth, the deceit of a rose-tinted past, pining for a simplicity the modern world seems to lack? Perhaps I'll vote for Count Binface and bring old C-Fax back. Hopefully not too many factual inaccuracies.
That was perfect, mate. I shall put that on the old social media. If you don't mind.
Yeah, lovely stuff.
Do that.
Yeah, I mean, you can take it if you like. We'll put it on the thing. So.
Oh, lovely. No, thank you very much. No, that's brilliant.
That'll probably be in the next book, I expect now.
Oh, so. Yeah, brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. And what we'll do is I'll tweet that to Count Binface anyway.
Oh, smashing. Yeah, you might enjoy that.
Yeah. But no, that's absolutely brilliant. Really good, really good. So how long does it take you to write something like that? Because we haven't known about meeting for long.
No, absolutely. It's with something like that I'm trying to write about subjects that I'm not, immersed in, shall we say. Sometimes it's you kind of start with a verse and then you're like, okay, where's Wikipedia? And then you're kind of just like finding things and thinking, well, how can I make that flow? How can I situate this in a time that's like the Carl Douglas things? And I mean, unless I'd gone on Wikipedia or whatever site it was I found, I never would have known that it sort of came about through what was the room 7059. That was the little room that they were given, I think, at the BBC or whatever to develop it.
Yeah. So when you have a book of poems, is it like picking your favourite child when you say, oh, I'm gonna, this is my favourite one in a book?
It kind of is, and it's different because the thing is when you're putting a set together to do it live. There are some that work much better on the page than they do when you do them live. I tend to go, when I do a live set, I tend to try and sometimes this is trial and error, because sometimes you try ones and they just die, and it's like, oh, that's not the one for a live set, clearly. But I try to go for the ones where there is an obvious end point and there are some obvious points where the humour is, and after a while, if you do it 2 or 3 times, you'll find that, okay, that the Guff CV one, for instance, I've done that in the set quite a bit, and I realised that one of the sort of made-up job descriptions, the amplified sort of job descriptions, one of them just wasn't getting a laugh. And like the others all were like consistently always getting a laugh. And I was like, I don't know why that one isn't working. But I went back because that one's going to be in not the next domesticated book, but I'm also working on a book, another book that I'm essentially siphoning off all the future ones about work and school are all going into a separate book, which will come out in the new year, I think. And so yeah, because it hadn't been published, I thought, well, I can still work on that. I'll be doing it live, and I know that line's not working, so I went back and changed it, and I did it on Friday, and the new line got off. So well happy.
Oh,
so yeah, sometimes it's particularly if you're doing it at a music gig, even more so because people aren't really there for the poet. They're being exposed to something that they're not particularly au fait with, or, you know, like you said earlier, basically poetry, it's, you know, all about war poetry, and it's all like quite dull and daffodils and all this stuff, you know, which is exactly what I thought really when I was at school, and probably for a very long time after, to be honest. And it was only really getting into things like John Cooper Clarke, Ivor Cutler, people like that I thought, you know, this could be something else entirely. This doesn't have to be that really boring, flat stuff that we used to do. That was all very worthy, but actually not very interesting and not very funny, or, you know, whatever. So yeah, I mean, it is a different thing. But trying to pick one out of a book is extremely hard. I mean, I'm happy to pick one, but
I shall pick one for you. So what we'll do, we'll pick one for you. We'll do it at your latest book, and I'll make sure it's not an epic as well.
yeah. There are a couple of long ones in there.
That's it. Okay. Who sung "Here Comes the Mirror Man"? Was that Human League?
Human League.
Human League. Well, there you go. Here's your Human League inspired one there.
Okay.
This is for all you listeners out in Sheffield.
Hope you do. So this one's called "Here Comes the Mirror Man." If you look in the mirror and there's nothing to please you, if you stare long and hard and think, who is this geezer? There's a stranger looking back that you don't recognise. He's got peanuts for teeth and bags for his eyes. His eyebrows are wiry and out of control. It's hard to believe all the hearts that he stole. Don't take it too hard, you can take it from me. You're probably not as stupid and fat as you think. Your brain has a filter and it makes things seem worse. You want to slam your whole life into reverse. And when I say you, and when I say you're, I mean it in general, not specific terms. They're not universal truths to be rung up the flagpole, and they don't apply to you because you've always been awful.
Brilliant. That's it. So like always wear sunscreen, isn't it?
yeah.
That's brilliant. So, what's the best place to actually find your books and your music? What site would be best at the moment?
God, it's quite disparate, really. But the main site where you can, even if it's not there, you can find links to the other things, is jamesdomestic.com. It's probably the easiest one to remember.
Yeah.
But I also run, I have a site called kiburecords.bigcartel.com.
Yeah, and a lot of your spoken word poetry is on Kibu Records as well.
Yeah.
And that's it's a punk record label, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a label that I started about 12 years ago, which, to be honest, I'm running down a little bit now because I haven't got the time to run it properly. But we've got one more release coming up, which is a garage punk band that I do called The Groins, and so that's coming out, I think, in a couple of months, that album. And then I probably won't release anything on the label for at least a year. It's just got crazy. That's about the 64th release on the label, and pressing vinyl has just become so expensive. It's absurd, honestly. Since I've been doing it, and like I say, I've been pressing records for the label for a decade plus now. The prices seem to go up 5 to 10% roughly every 5 or 6 months.
Why is this? Is this hipster value, is it, do you think?
There are various things. That is part of it. I mean, it always seems a bit annoying, really, because a lot of these record pressing plants that really for a long time during the 90s and the 2000s weren't getting an awful lot of trade. It was really punk bands, underground punk bands, still pressing vinyl, and the dance music scene doing vinyl. And often on very small runs, 500 here, maybe 1,000 there, those sort of things. But we kept those plants going.
Yeah.
But now, they don't want to know about that. They want to make it as expensive and off-putting as possible so they can concentrate on doing record store day releases. Oh, there's this an old Beatles LP, we're going to do a limited run of 60,000 on green vinyl.
Only 60,000.
Yeah, I know. Some David Bowie picture disc of a song that's been out about 25 times that you could go to the boot sale and buy 50p. It's like, and it's all that stuff. So it's got incredibly expensive. I've had to put prices up. It's always been like a not-for-profit label. It's not been a non-profit label because you can't. I mean, honestly, some punk labels a few years ago were literally selling their records at cost, which is all very noble, and keeping it affordable. But if you've got to sell every single copy of that record before you can put another one, it makes it all a very slow process, And often you won't, But I mean, like 4 or 5 years ago, I could press 300 of something or do a split release with another label and have 200, 250 copies of something, and 80% of them would go within the first month or so, and then the rest would trickle out over the course of the rest of the year. Now you put something out and you'll probably do 20-25% in that first month, and then you'll maybe sell one every few weeks after that, because no one's got any money anymore. Everyone's skin, and you've had to more or less double the prices in 10 years. It's just nuts.
Maybe there's a vinyl fatigue as well, because there's so much now out there for vinyl. Whereas before it was sort of like, I've bought vinyl from yourself before, and it's sort of like, I've got a record player, I'd like to have something completely different. I will spend £10 on a 7-inch sized single because it's special, But you get to the point now where you're seeing re-releases of things that you've got on CD, and in fact it's not very good value for money because it's got less tracks on it than the CD.
Absolutely.
But it's the cachet. Everyone's got everything on vinyl, but some of these LPs play at 45, and you've got two discs instead of one.
Yeah, that's madness. I mean, in fairness, a lot of the albums that I'm on play at 45, but that's because they're punk records. They're quite short. And they are like 16 songs, but it's actually always something to aim for, to be honest, is because you'll get a louder and slightly better cut of 45. I mean, it's fairly negligible to most people's ears, to be honest, probably mine also, to be honest, but it is a louder cut.
So it's like an audio file sort of.
It kind of is, but nonetheless, I think putting a double album out on 45 that's just stupid. I think if you're just going to put one album out anyway, but the album's only like 20, 22, 24 minutes long, and you can do it on 45, then you might as well, because it'd be better, but better quality, and you're not sort of fleecing people for another disc or anything.
But by the time you sat down, it's time to get up and flip it over.
Well, honestly, that 5-inch record that I mentioned earlier, you've barely got time to get your bum back in the chair before it's over.
Wow.
I've actually got a 2-inch single that someone did. Oh, honestly, it's to be honest, it's got about 20 minutes of music, 20 seconds of music aside. It's just a terrible racket, really. But most people can't play it, and I got a load in because when the guy, I know the guy that put it out a few years ago, and I got like 20 copies in and just sold them really, really quickly because people just a novelty. But probably out of those 20 copies, probably only about 2 people could actually play them.
Like a little coaster for a mug, isn't it?
Kind of, honestly, it's like that. Like the little band of music's like that 2 mil thing, But it's even the 5-inch that we put out with Police the Tramp. It's some people can't play it because if you've got one of those, those auto return things. So if you put your needle in so far and then it just goes back.
Yeah, you have to recalibrate it to do it. Yeah,
absolutely. If you haven't got auto return, and I haven't on most of my decks, it's you can just play it. But if you've got auto return, it thinks that you're at the end of the record when you're just getting to the start of it and automatically pings it back. So, yeah, but there you are. That's the fun of vinyl, isn't it?
That's it. Have you experimented any more with tape cassette?
I haven't done any tapes for ages, actually. The last thing I did was probably the Dub Weasel thing. Put out some reggae stuff a while back. And it was stuff that I'd recorded before the Domestics started. But because the Domestics got busy, I just didn't do anything with it. And then I was speaking to a guy about it who runs a little tape label. And I said I had this stuff, and I sent it to him, and he went, "Oh yeah, I'll put this out." I only put out like 100 copies or something. I've still got a few left, but it's I've got a tape player and I've got a load of tapes, and to be honest, I just never think to play them really.
I had this idea of doing like a retro thing of like, you know, putting some of my podcasts on cassette. But they go on so long, you don't actually realise how much physical media you actually use up with this. So I did a particular...
You'd be doing like a double cassette, wouldn't you?
That'd just be the introduction. You know, it's sort of like, yeah, you're looking at like what a C90 is 45 a side, so that's 46 minutes either side, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's it's 90 minutes, hour and a half. You know, and that, you know, some that would work, but then where do you curtail the podcast so they can turn it over? Yeah,
exactly. It all gets a bit tricky, doesn't it? Really?
It does, and this is the thing with media that I've tend to find. Like, you know, when you look at you look at sort of like, you know, when films first come out, the talkie first come out, right? You know, these silent films will go about 20 minutes because all the media could handle 20 minutes of stuff. And then you sort of move on to feature films, and feature films were going about an hour and a half. Then they got hour and 40. Then you got Ben Hur. They got a bit longer as technology got a bit better.
I mean, I remember when I was a kid, you assumed that a film was probably about an hour and a half.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. And but you now get Netflix, where your series go on for, you have to invest like 14 hours of your life to watch, like June or something like that. You know? And it's sort of like, you now go, right, okay, I'm now going to transpose what we, you know, what people do now. They just spend longer and longer and longer in front of all this stuff. And it's the same with podcasts. I mean, you know, if this idea was pitched, I'm going to speak to you know, a punk poet, you know, and all that, they go, right, 12 minutes. You know, you got 12 minutes to go, hello, yes, you must be James, nice to meet you, thank you very much.
See you later.
Like Steve Wright interview, innit?
Exactly.
It's like,
Gone before you've arrived.
That's it, cheerio. You know, and that's the thing with it. So it's sort of like a double-edged sword, really. You know, it's sort of like, I pine for the old technology, but then at the end of the day,
it does have limitations.
It's shot its bolt, you know. It doesn't allow you to create like the things that I'm doing in
No, and there are some things that just will not work in that format. I mean, I guess there's a reason why podcasts didn't exist in the 50s. You know, it's like, you know, because really there just wasn't the medium to make them work. You know,
that's right.
I mean, you might. I suppose the possibility is you could have someone for a very long radio interview, but probably that wouldn't happen because they would assume that it was too long and people would get bored and wouldn't invest the time in it.
Well,
and even then, I mean, it's not like you could go back and listen to it again, you know, because it just wasn't possible then.
Well, and the thing with a podcast, you can pick it up and leave it and then come back to it and things like that, you know. It's sort of like the amount of times you're diving in and out of a car while one resumes, you know. That's the thing about it. And you can find podcasts about anything. Yeah, so I always ask people, because this is a technology podcast, and you've given me a brilliant poem about technology, about CFAX, and Phil Don't Work Here Anymore, which people would have heard as well in here, and the homework as well, which is all technology based. So you certainly qualify to be in the Byte High No Limit stable there, James.
I did have a ZX Spectrum when I was a kid.
This was what I was going to ask you. What's your first technology that you remember using as a child? Doesn't have to be the Spectrum, by the way. You could say, I used to play with a tape recorder and sing into it.
I did, yeah. Well, not sing into it, no, but I do remember being around. It's something I used to do when we went round my nan and granddad's on one side of the family. They had a tape recorder, a little microphone. I used to go in there and like make pretend radio shows and stuff. Just ridiculous, you know. Yeah. So there was that, and then the Spectrum later on. Yeah. I mean, weirdly, I was into music when I was like 5 or 6, and like the first records that I got were like little 7-inch singles. My first 7-inch single was Stand and Deliver by Adam and the Ants, which I asked for Christmas, which I still think is pretty good. There's a lot worse singles you could start off with, you know. And the first album was his Kings of the Wild Frontier album, which I still rate and think is a very good record, actually.
I agree with that completely. Yeah.
You know, nothing else like it, actually. It's, even now, it sounds really good. So, yeah, I was into music then, and I had a few records and things before most of my sort of peers did. But then I think we got a second-hand ZX Spectrum, and I think that just blew my mind. I was too interested in playing Manic Miner and Jet Set Willie. And do you remember that one? What was it called? Cookie. Do you remember that?
Oh, Cookie. Yeah.
I used to love Cookie.
Game, yeah.
Most people don't even remember it, but I used to love that.
Yeah, pretty colourful game. That's by Program Ultimate. That was by. Cookie, yeah. But yeah, it's quite sought after. That
Oh really? Yeah. I really wish, because I remember when I left the family home, that the ZX Spectrum was in the loft, and I took it with me. The first when I moved out home, I took it with me, and I kept it for a little while. Didn't do anything with it, but then I thought one day, do you know what, I'm going to get it out. I had a pang of nostalgia, and I thought, I'm going to get that out, and I'm going to set that up and see if I can get that working again. It just didn't work.
Oh no.
I think I took the top panel off, and I think the membrane underneath had gone all weird or whatever.
That often happens. Yeah.
But if I'd have had half an ounce of sense and not been a young drunkard, and when I think about things, I would have held on to it, and when I'd got a bit older, I would have, and I had a bit more money, I would have taken it somewhere and had it fixed. I'm sure somebody could have fixed it. But the thing is, you can get stuff that replaces all that now, can't you?
Yeah, this is it.
I'm a mate of mine, a guitarist in Domestics, actually. He's got this thing. I don't know what it is because I'm not that technologically minded, but basically it's about like 200 like old school games, you know.
Oh right.
I can't remember what it's called now.
Yeah.
But he loves it. He's really into it. And it's got all that. I love that Spectrum. That was great. Never get those joysticks to work though. You know the ones you programmed in.
Oh right, yeah.
You had to go, left for Z or whatever it was.
Yeah.
You know, were they Kempston ones or were they?
Kempston ones, yeah. They were. Yeah, but this is how things go full circle now. Your kids these days don't use QAOP like we used to. They use the keyboard. They use the keyboard. They use WZA and like these three keys over here.
Oh, really?
So they've gone back to keyboard control.
How weird.
Isn't that strange? You know, you're in this thing
Seems like a bit of a retrograde move, doesn't it?
Yeah, but they're more responsive, I think. You know, it's sort of like when they're going around their dungeon shooting the shit out of each other. You know, that's
what they
WZA,
like.
you know, and all that.
So no joysticks anymore.
No, they've got that and a mouse and normally a headset where they're abusing each other online.
Yeah, I've heard that's a thing.
Yeah, that is a thing, I think. But I can't really play games. I prefer the hardware, you know. So.
Yeah, I was never really a gamer. I did on the Spectrum when I was a kid, but beyond that, you know, basically after I had that a couple of years, I then got back into music and what do stuff, and then I just, you know, and I've got mates who, you know, they talk about these various games they play, and I haven't got a clue, to be honest with you.
No. Best way. But that's it. That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much, James.
You're most welcome, Carl.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I shall look forward to your work, and I think I'll be a bit of a grouping. Come follow you about a bit, actually.
Okay, smashing, please do.
And then I'll come and follow you out of and see what you're up to, and jamesdomestics.com site for your tour dates and things like that.
That's all up there. Yeah, or on Facebook it's all on there as well, or the Domestics page. But yeah, I've got stuff coming up.
So it's all fairly dynamic, isn't it? So you can check one day and it won't be in there, and then the next day it will be. So keep checking the site.
Absolutely, There's things being added kind of, you know, all the time, really. We're in the process of booking a little tour in October, probably up to Leeds and Sheffield and all that sort of up north and all that stuff. And always getting new poetry assignments. That's all good.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you, mate. Excellent. Great stuff.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.